What's the matter, Sonny?
No one wants to buy my comic book.
Why not? Did you put your heart and soul and aspirations into it?
I did.
Then why does no one want to buy it?
Because they're all jerks.
Come on now, Sonny. They can't all be jerks.
Well, I made a hero that wears his hat like I do.
Go on.
They're a
Redacted.
copy which everybody loves.
Redacted.
Oh, I see. It's the audience.
The what?
Use your creative skills and original ideas to defeat them.
Copyright strike. Hello, my name is Michael. Welcome back to Dumb Culture. This is commentary on how dumb culture is currently. In this podcast, guys, we're going to talk about everything from dating to politics, from pop culture to history. So sit back and let's have a discussion about pop culture, modern traditional versus woke. This is going to be a controversial episode, guys, so I'm changing up the format a little bit, and we are going to stomp on a lot of toes. So, just to make it clear, I am not here to debate the meaning of woke. I am not here to debate morality. I am here to use logic and a dictionary to define modern, traditional, and what woke is. So, with that, guys, let's start this discussion. Before we get too far, I want to remind you that if you want to add anything to the conversation, guys, if you want to give me any type of feedback, advice, information, clarification, confirmation, objectification, or you simply want to say, hey, you idiot, you can comment below or reach me at McDougle's Mine on all social media. So, with that said, guys, I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I'm a big fan of all things pop culture, as you can see behind me here with all my stuff there. I am a classic nerd. I was made fun of in school, and I am made fun of to this current day for being a nerd. So, with that said, I'm also a big fan of philosophy, and I try to stay updated in all things philosophical. And I've never taken a class of or on philosophy. I've only ever just read and discussed the meanings of life with friends and family. So, that gives you a little bit of background information about myself on this topic as we discuss it. Now, let's get into this. And again, let me get my notes ready because I can be a bit of a goober before starting these videos. Let's get into this, guys. Let's talk about Western society and our culture. Western society is mainly conservative. However, we do progressively become more liberal over time. We'll take the Renaissance only for an example and talk about all the things that happened in the Renaissance, which was the old countries of Europe. The people got together and decided that they didn't like how the governing bodies, whether it was religious or politicians, they didn't like how they were telling them to live. So they started seeking more freedoms, as it were. And you could say most conservatives of today would not really think much about what they did back then. It was fairly tame for the most part. This is not a documentary on what happened in the Renaissance. It's merely a comment, if you will, and a lead up to a much larger current world problem. So let's move forward a little bit. Let's look at Open Lab at City Tech website, in which they describe pop culture as the people of the 1920s reflecting a new era of prosperity and freedom. So what this is talking about, guys, is pop culture came about people having more freedom, more, I don't even know what the precise word would be, but they were actually able to enjoy life and all things around it. And as communications and the ability to travel got better and better, they were able to digest, if you will, different forms of pop culture, which was music, movies, books, and stuff of that nature. And a little bit later on, comic books would emerge because I think, what was it, Superman, the original, was it 1938? Comment down below if I got that wrong, but I think the first, like, the Action Comics, I think they came out in 1938. I could be wrong on that. Please correct me in the comments below on that, guys. Whoa, and I just smacked the table. But moving on from there, guys, let's talk more about our current pop culture. It's been 100 years since the 1920s, which is typically what is the starting point of pop culture. So it's been 100 years, and a lot of our pop culture, our traditional stories, come from around that era of pre and post World War II. Let's look at Star Wars, for example. In Star Wars, you have Hitler and Vader. Vader was kind of like this figure that was representative of a tyrannical dictator. Hitler. How many times can I say that name? So if we look at that and then we look at how the Sith and Jedi fought with their lightsabers, that is actually kind of what's the right word? Like an acknowledgement of samurai, which are Japanese swordsmen, or the warring class, and which is a tie-in to how the Japanese allied with Nazi Germany back in the day. And please, YouTube, I'm using the N word in a very correct historical manner. I am not trying to be aggressive with it. We are talking about history. So hopefully any moderators that see that understand where I'm coming from. But it's getting to the point, guys, where our stories are it's almost a necessity for our stories to be updated. Let's look at X-Men real quick, Marvel's X-Men. The main characters in that, and pretty much the main protagonist and the main antagonist, Professor Xavier and Magneto. So those two characters come from around World War II. In fact, I believe Magneto is stated as being a Holocaust survivor. So even let's make him a little bit younger. We'll say he's 8 years old, okay? So World War II ended in 1945. So it ended in 1945. It's currently 2023. He's got to be minimum of like 88 years old right now, guys. 88 years old. What's he doing? Running around bending Geritol cans with his magnetic telekinesis powers? I don't think so. It's getting to the point where we have to update these stories. And I know, going again with the X-Men analogy, there's some minor backlash that the next set of X-Men movies are going to be representative of the civil rights movement, where they'll portray Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. I'm interested in seeing what they do with that, guys, because I do believe our stories need to be updated, because they could do some stupid cop-out where, you know, mutants age slower than average people. So that's the tie-in to World War II, but just, nah, that's stupid. That's my personal opinion anyways. Let's move forward a little bit, guys. Let's go on to actually define what woke is. All right, so let's take a look at Merriam-Webster, okay? So if you guys aren't aware, Merriam-Webster is the book in the United States, or the dictionary rather, that every school uses. I used it in all of my grade school. I used it in all of my college, university studies. Merriam-Webster is the dictionary. So it says, woke is being aware of and actively attentive to important societal facts and issues, especially of racial justice. So you can say what you want about that, guys, but that is the literal dictionary definition. We'll leave it at that. If you go on to Google and you Google what is woke, it comes up with a Wikipedia article, and I should have wrote down the sources in the Wikipedia article, but they define it as drama, I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead of myself here. Starting in the 2010s, it encompasses broader awareness of social inequalities, which is a pretty vague general idea and concept, which pretty much means social justice, and we all know the stigma of social justice warriors. They're insufferable. That is simply a stigma. I think A lot of people's they're what's the word? What's the right word? They're not exact. They're misunderstood intentions, as it were. And I think people on both sides of the political spectrum can be nasty for the, the least bit to say about that. They can be nasty. And we discussed in the last video, guys, about how uh, politics typically are drama oriented. And that's just how it is. So when we're dealing with something like this, that is a very big talking point in politics right now, we're going to have to remain logical. And myself am more logical. I tend to throw emotions out and use pure logic, and is what it is. So, if we're going to differentiate drama oriented and actual social issues, we need to look at history. And when we look at history, guys, we're going to have to use current societal norms and decide whether or not it was or is justified. Okay? So, what I mean by that is we're going to take a look at some examples here in a little bit, but let's get back on pop culture. I do want to talk about history. We're going to get there. But let's get back to pop culture. So, traditional media is full of just failed movies, books, musicians, and songs. You know, it's manga and anime. There's tons of failed whatever out there. There has been a natural progression and a filter that has decided what is good and what is bad in traditional media. And we're going to define traditional media as what was prevalent 100 years ago at the start of pop culture. And I think everyone here in the West can agree that 100 years ago is far more conservative, and the norms were heterosexual Christian values. Again, going back to my point earlier, it's almost becoming a necessity to update these because that's just life. That's what we do in Western society. We become more liberal with time. So it's historical fact. I don't know what you guys want from that. Okay, so let's get back at it. They went through a filter, guys. The filter, can any of you guess what that filter is? It's the audience. The audience decides what they want to spend money on. And what the audience spends money on determines good from bad. So those that made good material, good content, they get to continue making their content so long as the audience deems it is good. Now, the people, the creators of bad material or content, they obviously get thrown to the curbside and left to change or redo whatever it is that takes for the audience to consider good. Now, not necessarily every time they have that option. Some of them just outright give up, whether it's money or the drive to do so. It happens. You know, people fail, people stop trying. And whether or not that's a good thing, that's a topic for another day. But let's move forward a little bit. What media is almost demanding an audience right now. They are demanding people like it. They are demanding people to spend money on it. And you guys can see this all across the internet. There are nasty comments out there about what's the recent movie that came out? Love Bros or something like that. It's a movie about two homosexual men. That's a rom-com. I heard about it and I was like, well, you know, bully for you. Way to go, guys. You know, go watch your movies. But again, as I've stated before, I'm a super straight male. I have no interest in going to watch that. I don't have interest in watching heterosexual rom-coms. So I don't understand why we would force people to watch something they wouldn't necessarily watch to begin with. And that's just how it goes, I guess. But yeah, it is what it is. So, with that said, guys, we are inundated right now with failed woke material. All right, failed woke content. It's terribly written because we can, for the most part, all agree that when you make someone's identity, their sexuality, their what they present gender-wise, when you make that the focus, it's almost like being lectured to and not entertained. All right. And we'll just say it's being lectured to. It's not entertaining to be lectured. No one likes to be lectured. Unless you're trying to watch something like this and you want to learn something. I am simply trying to teach and give you some simple logic to go by in these types of topics, guys. Obviously, if I get to where I'm preachy and lecturing, call it out in the comments. Let me know down below. DM me at McDougall's Mind on all social media. I'm here for it. So, with that said, guys, I don't think woke material should be considered for entertainment purposes. Unless we can say that our pop culture has almost always, since its adolescence, had woke material in it, and it's only now just become a problem. Let's take a look at Star Trek, and let me pull up this long-winded thing I wrote. And this is a shout out to Sir Leo. I talked about him in the last video, guys. Sir Leo has given me some advice, some topics to talk about, and this specifically came from him on Star Trek. So let's talk about the beginnings of Star Trek. It aired back in February of 1965. The main creator, which was Gene Roddenberry, was born in August 1921. Now remember, guys, I said back at the beginning of all this that pop culture started in the 1920s. So Gene Roddenberry was born at the start of pop culture becoming a part of culture. You know, that's where it got the terminology pop culture, popular culture. So born in August 1921, and some interesting things happened throughout his life. We're going to look at those historical events, but first let's look at the characters he created, which were starting with Neoda Uhura, an African American woman. African American woman. When did I say this came out? 1965. Guess when the civil rights movements were? 1950s to 1960s. And about that time, women, there was another women's rights. Because women's suffrage came first, and then it was women's rights, I believe, came next. African American woman, all right? She was the, what's her official title? Comms communications officer on the bridge? Yeah. Comms communication officer on the bridge. Keep that in mind. Moving on, let's look at Spock, played by Leonard Nimoy, who was clearly an alien amidst the realization that there could possibly be alien life. You have to understand, guys, most of us in this current day were born with the concept of there is possibly extraterrestrial life outside of the Earth. You got to remember, back in 1965, when baby boomers were still just pretty much babies, that people did not even have a concept of what an alien was, let alone an extraterrestrial. You know, the only alien, as defined by a dictionary, was a person from a foreign country. And that's in any country. I myself, when I went to Ireland, I was an alien. Okay? When I was in Ireland, I was an alien as an American. That's just what it means. All right, moving forward, let's also look at Hikaru Kato Sulu, a Japanese-descended helmsman on the bridge, played by George Takei during the Asian Age of Paranoia after World War II. That's a very, very... You have to understand, guys, that this was a time in America's history where there was a lot of racism towards Asians because of World War II. George Takei was in a position of power on the bridge. Let's move forward. Next, we'll look at Pavel. Oh man, I'm going to butcher this name. I am sorry. Pavel Androvich Chekhov, who was a Russian ensign portrayed by Walter Koenig during the Red Scare, or better known as the Cold War. Americans, all races, did not like Russians. I'm going to repeat that. All Americans did not like Russians because there was a nuclear threat. Whether it was in the 50s, whether it was in the early 60s, just before Star Trek came out, yeah, he was in a position of power. Moving forward, oh, I lost my spot here. Okay, here we go. So just getting back to it, those are the characters I wanted to specifically look at. They were on the bridge of a vessel, spacefaring or not, fictional or not. When you're on the bridge of a vessel, that is a position of power. Any person in the military can tell you that if you are on the bridge in an assigned position, you are the head person of that position. So anyone under you in navigation, anyone under you in communication, you have the final say other than the captain themselves. All right, security, whatever. So that's just some things about the characters and historical events that I wanted to talk about, guys. Let's look at the beginning of Star Trek, the original series, and what happened with NBC when it first started airing. The first 2 seasons were met with a lot of controversy and a lot of backlash. I mean, it got so bad to the point, guys, where in season 3, they decided that instead of focusing on social interactions, on how the characters interacted, and there is a little bit to be said about Gene Roddenberry's vision for the future and what utopia was. But I want to save that talk for a later date. But he wanted all the characters to act as if they all had freedom and equality. And I lost my spot here. My apologies. So they stopped focusing on the social interaction, guys, where everybody was pretty much equals, and they started focusing more on Monster of the Week style type of episodes. You know, whatever gelatinous monster, whatever, or they trilbies, I think, the little fluff balls. You know, what thing could scare people and kill red shirts? Right. That's what it started focusing on after the backlash they received. Now, with that said, guys, over the years, that series obviously has become a very beloved series. Then we got, you know, the Next Generation, yada, yada, yada. But Star Trek passed the filter of the audience. The audience is the primary filter, and we have to remember that going forward. I'm going to beat it into your guys' heads, okay? If you watch that introductory cartoon I made, that was the whole point, is the audience has to be able to filter. And if you don't have the correct filter, or not even the correct filter, but original concepts and ideas, the audience isn't going to like it. They're not going to be interested in it. But yeah, so we can look at other things, and we talked about Marvel, X-Men earlier, about how they dealt with the Holocaust survivors and civil rights movement. We already talked about Star Wars, but I want to bring it to Bruce Lee, who deserves a spot on this list. If you guys don't know about Bruce Lee, and hopefully you do, hopefully you know, the younger generation, because I'm 38. If you're younger than me and you don't know who Bruce Lee is, you're about to learn. So Bruce Lee was an actor and a martial artist back in the 50s and 60s, and he broke a lot of societal and cultural norms between Eastern Asia and Western cultures. So, guys, he's an incredible person. Whether it's his philosophical ideas or his martial arts abilities, he broke a lot of barriers. So, yeah. He was a very big factor, and this isn't, again, a documentary on Bruce Lee. There's plenty of stuff out there to go check out, watch his movies, watch his interviews. If you want to read a book, check out The Warrior Within. It's in my collection that's down the hallway here. In fact, at a later date, I may end up changing the pop culture paraphernalia here, guys, and putting my books there. So you guys can see, I may not have an official degree, but I do like to read and consider myself, for the most part, a learned person. All right, let's move forward. So all of our pop culture media went through a filter, okay? And that filter, again, was the audience. It went through a Darwinistic progression. So, I believe woke entertainment and other woke media are not getting the chance to progress, all right? So, let's look at a few things here, and what do I mean by that? Woke entertainment and other media are not being given a chance to succeed, all right? And what I mean by that, guys, if you take a look at what the corporations, what the entertainment corporations, the movie makers and all bookmakers, they have a higher risk and success requirement. You know, if something is going to fail, it's going to cost the company tons and tons of money. And to understand this, guys, we'll look at 1950. We'll compare $1 from 1950 to a dollar from current day, 2023. Now, the website in 2013 dollars.com states 1950, $1 is now worth $12.48. Whew, that's a heck of an increase. The cumulative price increase is 1,148.30%. Yes, that zero is important. So, that just gives you guys an idea. The risk back then isn't quite on the level that it is now. And there is something to say about inflation because, you know, obviously $1,000 back then would be, I don't know, 100,000 now or something like that. That's just me going off the top of my head. So correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. So with this stated, guys, we are going to get a lot of recycled stories. It's going to be the same stuff over and over and disappointingly over again. And the reason for that is because companies are going the safe route. You know, they want to do whatever makes money, whether it's taking, you know, a fictional character, and I don't want to get a copyright strike, but if you take a fictional character and you make them homosexual, you know, to make it current day, people have problems with that because you're taking an already established character, fictional or not, and changing the core concept of that character. And I would say sexuality is a pretty core concept of a character. Yeah, it's getting to the point where woke media just is not getting the same opportunity to progress through the filter that is the audience. And again, guys, there's tons and tons and tons of failed traditional pop culture material, and tons of it failed and was filtered through. Now, you can say that there is a lot of failed woke material, that it's all garbage, but it's not getting the same amount. It doesn't have the same level of, you know, hey, this is okay, all of this is bad. And very few things that are considered woke in modern day have the approval of society and the audience at large. So, other than talking about money, let's talk about biases. That's something else that could determine whether or not woke media could fail. And something that is very partial to my heart is Norse mythology. And let's talk about Thor for a minute, guys. In Norse mythology, there are two primary literary texts that we take Norse mythology out of, and that's the Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda. There's a few others, but we're not going to cover them. We're going to focus simply on the Prose and the Poetic Edda. In those, Thor is described as being masculine. He is quick to anger. He's the strongest amongst the Aesir, the Norse gods. He is the butt of many jokes, and overtly he is the epitome of masculinity. Men should strive to be like Thor. And that is how Thor is viewed within Norse mythology. In fact, because of the way pop culture is going currently, there are a lot of people that have picked back up worshiping Norse paganism, the Norse gods that were pretty much dead for the last, I don't know, few centuries. But because of pop culture, they brought interest to Norse mythology. And let's take a look at the pop culture parts of Norse mythology, Thor specifically, which in the comic books by Marvel, uh, Thor was a being who was pretty much considered a god, but he had an alter ego. I believe his name was Donald Drake. He was a doctor. And not to go too far into it, but Donald Drake found, uh, was it a cane? A cane or a twig or something in a cave. And he was going to use it to help him get out of the cave. And then he ended up transforming into Thor because he was worthy to possess the power of Thor. That's changed a little bit in modern day. Thor no longer has an alter ego. He is his own sentient creature or whatever. But moving forward, Disney now owns Marvel, and with that, they have started the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU. Thor, in that, has now become a household name because everybody recognizes Chris Hemsworth as Thor. In fact, you would be hard pressed to meet someone that does not recognize Chris Hemsworth solely as Thor. So if you see him in another movie, they wouldn't be like, "Oh, that's Tom Dick from blah blah blah." No, that's Thor. You're going to say, "Oh, hey, look, that's Thor." Also, the hammer Mjolnir is completely recognizable. There are very few people that would not recognize Thor's hammer Mjolnir. So pop culture does play a role in people's perception of historical items, fictional or not. So with that, let's get into a comic that was released in 2015. This is part of the controversy I was talking about earlier. The Mighty Thor, which is a comic book series where Jane Foster is worthy of wielding Thor's hammer Mjolnir and becomes the Mighty Thor, self-titled. I'm not a fan of this comic, guys, and the reason I'm not a fan of this comic is because Jane Foster is her own character in her own right. Thor is his own character in his own right. When Jane Foster picks up the hammer, she takes the mantle, the appearance, even the name of Thor. That drives me crazy and I don't like it. And I know, again, I understand that she is her own character, and it's mainly the name itself that bugs me and irritates me because I do believe that the end goal of this is to turn Thor into a female. And the reason I say that, guys, is because we need to go back and look at all the other characters that were able to wield Mjolnir, who were worthy of the power of Thor. Specifically, we're going to look at Beta Ray Bill because there's a whole list of characters that can pick up Thor's hammer and use it and gain his power. But specifically, let's look at Beta Ray Bill. If you're not familiar with Beta Ray Bill, his original inception was that he was an alien who was tasked with guarding an enormous ship that carried his entire civilization, the remnants of his civilization, as they were going through the universe trying to find a suitable home. Thor accidentally stumbles across this, and as he enters in, Beta Ray Bill mistakes him for an intruder seeking to cause harm. So they have a quick scuffle, and in a moment of just pure desperation, because Beta Ray Bill is about equivalent with baseline Thor without Mjolnir. So they're borderline equivalent. Beta Ray Bill grabs Mjolnir, picks it up, and starts beating the snot out of Thor. Well, we'll get into semantics another day, but Thor pauses, is like, whoa, 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 and realizes that since Beta Ray Bill is worthy of wielding Thor, he must be a good, decent person. We're going to skip a few plot points for time's sake, guys. Let's pick it back up with Beta Ray Bill meets Odin. And Odin talks to Beta Ray Bill and decides that he is worthy in his own right to have the powers of Thor and to protect his people. So Odin bestows Stormbreaker on Beta Ray Bill. Part of what drives me crazy about the MCU is they skip Beta Ray Bill, which is a phenomenal character, and kind of combine Thor's story with his. because of the Asgards, all of them getting on that spaceship as representation of Beta Ray Bill. Thor receiving Stormbreaker to avenge his people is kind of representation of Beta Ray Bill. Phenomenal character. Takes on the appearance of Thor, but by golly, he wants it known that he is his own character. He does not use Mjolnir, he uses Stormbreaker. He does not go by the name Thor, he goes by his own given name, Beta Ray Bill. And with that, guys, that's what makes me think that the Jane Foster run of Mighty Thor, they're trying to turn Thor directly into a woman. Because if they didn't do it with Beta Ray Bill and calling him Thor, then why did they do it with Jane Foster? And again, this is a bias that could lead into why woke material is failing, why woke content is just not clicking with the audience, because they're almost insulting the concepts of characters, guys. And I don't want this to be, and I just realized how far away my microphone is. That sucks. So I'm going to pull it closer, and hopefully you guys can hear me a lot better. But getting back on topic, guys, yeah, pop culture plays a role in how people perceive characters, historical events, fictional or not. And to prove this point even further, we're going to play a little bit of a game. I'm going to describe a character, all right? It should be pretty recognizable. Most average people should be able to know instantly who I'm talking about, and I want to see if you get it correct. All right? So, let's give you a quick description here. They use a magical staff. There is a journey with companions into an unknown location. He's not human, does have a monkey tail. He has an extreme mastery of martial arts. He transcends to godhood and likes to eat a lot of food. There was a specific altercation where he got in trouble for eating the food of gods and was punished for it. Can you guess who I'm talking about? If you guessed Goku from the Dragon Ball series created by Akira Toriyama, you are wrong. I was talking about Sun Wukong, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say most of you got that wrong. And a quick shout out to Akira Toriyama. I do love Goku. This is not hate. This is pure what is happening in society. Comment on what is happening in society. So I say that, guys, because most of you probably did get it wrong. If you got right and you know Sun Wukong, the stories behind him, let me know in the comments. I want to know if I was right or wrong about this. So I use that as an example, guys, that it does indeed play a role. Okay, pop culture plays a role in how people perceive, again, characters and stories, events, fictional or not. And to kind of wrap up here, guys, we need to focus on originality. And I'm going to put a shameless plug for my self-made cartoon, Black Chain Shadow Strife, here at the end. And the reason I'm putting this here, guys, is not necessarily to pander, but it's to give an example of what we need for non-traditional material. Black Chain, I'm tripping on my own words. Black Chain Shadow Strife is going to be an action, cyberpunk, anime-inspired cartoon where the characters are able to freely change their bodies as they wish because it is cyberpunk. And yes, there will be non-traditional characters. No, their gender, their sexual orientation, what they are attracted to is not going to be a focal point unless it is a well-written part of the story. Again, there will be non-traditional characters. But guys, this is not pandering. This is an example of what we need for woke material to exist, to thrive, to survive. But anyways, guys, since we made it to the end here, hopefully you can hear my microphone because I forgot to pull it close at the start of this. I'll check it out in the editing and see what I can do. But again, if you want to get a hold of me, contact me, guys. comment down below, send me a DM. I've got more stuff planned. Monday the 20th, when this video comes out, I am returning back to work. It is scheduled. I will be back to work on the 20th. So my ability to make these videos is going to slow down, but I am not giving up. I will have another video next week. And it may be quite a bit shorter than this one was, because this was a pretty hefty, factual-based, logic-driven discussion that we're having here. And I wanted to make sure we hit all the necessary points to get the point across. Okay? So, with that said, guys, thank you for watching, and God bless.